In our last module, we looked at how to create the basic format of a web page, including the HTML tag, the head and body tag, as well as adding some basic content, things such as H1 tags, H2 tags, paragraph tags, etc. However, most websites don't have just that type of information. If you look at most websites, you'll notice that they have a header and a footer as a minimum, and that's consistent across the wide variety of pages. If you look at most websites, there's a central design theme that runs throughout it. Now, this may be an elaborate design theme that was created by a team of designers, or it may be something very simple. The idea is that it lets you, the user, know that, hey, I'm still part of this web page. Now, you might move it to another web page and you go, oh, I know I'm still on this website because it's got the same header and same information up there. Or you might follow a link and notice that, hey, this is no longer on this website because I noticed those elements have changed. So let's look at how we're going to create that. I'm first going to open my template. Remember, I created this in my last module. It just gives me something I can work with, and I can always go back and modify this if I want to. In fact, because this would be something that would go onto all of my pages, I would probably actually put it in my template. That way I don't have to create it multiple times. So let's see how we're going to do that. So I go into my body. My body is where my content is displayed to my end user. And I'm going to create a header tag. This is a special tag. It's organizational in nature. So I'm just going to go header. Notice that when I close out the header tag, Visual Studio closes that for me. Remember I said that there's a lot of tags that have kind of similar names. We had the head tag, and you can see that up above. We have heading tags, which is your H1 through your H6. And then there is a header tag. And the header tag can actually be used in two different cases. We're going to talk about using it as the head of the page, that visual top that's going to display. So inside this, we're going to do things that are going to make my page distinctive or unique to it. So I'm going to put things like a title. Okay, so I can put anything I want here. Now you might think, well, should I use an H1 tag? It's going to make it bigger and bolder. Well, we're going to actually style this with CSS in just a little bit. That's going to be the next module, but right now we're just going to put just, hey, my website. Now I can put other things. For example, I might want to put a series of navigation links, in which case I'll use a Nav Tag. Inside my Nav Tag, I will have my links, and this once again just helps organize things. This is especially important for search engines, so they know how do I follow to get to other places on your website. I might include a logo, and I might use an image tag for that. I might include a form, because a lot of times you'll see a web page that's got a built-in search up at the top, make it easier to find things. We can thank Amazon for that design. In fact, they're one of the ones who helped kind of push that because they had too many products to list in categories and subcategories. Search was the only way to effectively find items on their website. And so they put the search right up there at the top. They made it one of the big, bold design things that you could really see. And then they took out most of the menus and options that you might normally see. It forced users to use a search, and now they've kind of trained the rest of the web population because so many people go to Amazon.com. They've trained them all to look for that search and know what to expect. Now, to implement a site-wide search requires a little bit of programming in the most cases. We're not going to go into that, so we're not going to include it. But if you saw something like that, you would see something like a form tag. And there would be several attributes that would be associated with it. We're not going to worry about this. So I'm going to delete out the form tag. We will talk about forms later on in a future module, but we're not going to talk about how to program on the back end for this class. After my header, I'm going to have my main content. This is going to be what's unique to the page. My header is going to be consistent. All my pages is going to be the same thing as my footer. The main content is going to change. Since this is a template that I'm modifying and I don't want to put content inside of my template, I'm going to put a comment. And this comment works just as if I was writing a comment in a programming language like Python or C++ or any of those types of languages. Of course, as you know, if you've learned those two languages, you know that comments are displayed differently depending upon who and what language you're using. So I'm going to use an HTML comment. Now, an HTML comment starts off similar to a tag. It's your open angle bracket, your exclamation point, and 2 dashes. And you'll notice that Visual Studio Code went ahead and put 2 dashes in a closing angle bracket. That's because it realizes that, hey, this is a comment. And so I'll just put a little content comment saying, hey, main content goes here. Just like a comment inside of a regular programming language like Java or any of those languages, it's ignored by the browser. Okay, so you're not going to see this. This is just for you, the web developer. All right, put a couple blank lines. Now I'm going to add the bottom, which is going to be my footer. And notice there is a footer tag. I'm just going to hit Tab. That's going to close it out. Typically, your footer is only shown at the bottom of the page. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what goes in a footer? Well, it really depends upon your design. And in some cases, the country of your origin, it might include restrictions or requirements based upon your industry. So certain industries have certain requirements. Things such as legal firms and medical practices, things like that. Sometimes they have some sort of associated verbiage they want to include on everything. You know, they might say, you know, nothing on this web page should be considered to be legal advice. Please contact our law offices to receive actual advice about your situation. You might have a medical doctor that says, if you're facing an emergency, please dial 911. Otherwise, call our office at... You know, those types of things that you might find. Some are just standard practices, some are legal requirements, and some things, like I said, can be mandated differently by different countries and things like that. So always know any type of situation and all the rules and regulations involved with those types of things. With the footer, though, we'll look at a couple different things, and I'm going to group them together. And to group things, HTML has something called a div tag. Now, we used to use a div tag to do any of our groupings, and we would group things to group things, and div tags were all over the place. With HTML5, they create a lot of these organizational tags, things like headers and footers. And what they did is they looked at popular websites, and Google went in and they created a report based on looking at hundreds of thousands of websites. And they say, you know what? 90+% of all websites have a div, and they use an attribute called a class to define it as a footer, or they use an attribute to define this as a header, and they name it. And we'll talk about how we name our tags in the next module. But you could see how they were being used over and over and over again, these similar types of tags. And that's where things like the header and the nav and now the footer that I'm showing you come from. Now, if we need a generic organization, the div still works, and it works great. How we're going to use it is kind of up to us. In our case, we're just going to group and organize this. So I might put in here some address info. If I want to move it to the immediate next line without being like a whole new paragraph, I'm going to use the line break tag, which is BR. BR is short for break. And I could keep writing on the same line. Anytime I do a break tag, I always like to go to a new line. That's just me. And so I could say something like 1313. And continue on like that. I could, of course, have another thing, and this might be legal info. If I want legal info to stand out, I could do something like use the strong tag. The strong tag is one of those tags that we mentioned earlier as an inline tag. That means that if you have it inside of a paragraph or a div or whatever, it's not going to create a new line or anything like that. It's just going to display it right there. By default, the strong tag is shown as being bold. Now, that's by default, and it's just say, hey, it's strong. We want to, make this stand out. We can change that with CSS, and in our next module, we're going to look at how we can make some of those changes. So under my legal info, I might have things like copyright. And I can say something like ampersand COPY, and you'll notice that it comes up here and shows it. Visual Studio Code is great because they give you all these hints about as you're typing things. You notice there's a few others. But notice that and copy semicolon will actually display the little C inside the circle. Some places need that to effectively show copyright. Some places you can just put copyright. Once again, know the rules requirements based upon your location. And here you might put in your copyright and those types of things. You might have another div for a disclaimer, and you can do that. I want this once again to stand out, but not quite like a strong, and so I might use the emphasis tag, the EM. EM is short for emphasis. And I can put it like this. Okay. So I switch back to my template on my HTML page. You'll notice I see my header, I see my footer. You'll see things like the address and legal info and disclaimer and those types of things. You can see that my strong is bold. My emphasis by default is italics. It shows emphasis. I can change that. I don't have to be italic. I don't have to be just italic. I can maybe change a color or something. But there's also a lot of limitations in this. There's, the header and footer don't stand out. So we're going to look at using CSS in the next module and how can we make these things stand out and make a little bit of design aspect to this. The other thing I want you to notice is that the comment, as I mentioned, did not show here. So we have modified our template. We now have our header and footer. We have a place to put the content. We don't have our CSS yet. And so we're going to work on doing that in our next module. And that's going to really start to make it look like a regular or real website. And we don't have to do a lot of things. We just need to do something. So watch the next module for that information.